The next drawing tool I'm going to show you how to use is the rectangle and oval tool. If you hold the mouse button down on this particular tool here, you'll see a number of options pop up. You'll want to stick to the top two options. The other tools look similar, but they'll provide you with objects that don't link up to anything else when you're drawing, which is normally something you don't want, especially when it comes to filling in shapes and things later on. So stick to these top two tools here. Both these tools will allow you to add an outline when you draw, as well as a particular fill color. Now this can give you some fairly quirky behavior, so I'll just show you what happens when you're drawing and things to watch out for. If you do have trouble using these tools with the outline, then if you do what I've got here, which is to set the color to be no color, you might find things are a little bit simpler for you. But for now, I'm going to show you a couple of examples drawing using both an outline and a fill. So I'm going to pick an outline of black and a fill of blue, pale one for now. On the right hand side, you can see there are options for the fill and for the outline, the stroke. Stroke is another word for the outline of the shape. I'm going to set the stroke a little bit bigger than the default. The default is 1. I'm going to set it to 4 just to make it a bit chunkier, so you can see what's going on. All right, so dragging gives me a rectangle. First thing to notice then, if I go to my selection tool here and I click on the inside of the rectangle here, you'll see it's only the inside that's selected, the filled area. If I move that, you'll notice that it's independent of the stroke of the outline, and that's something that can really can get people in a bit of a muddle when you're trying to move things around and the outline doesn't move, the fill does, and things can get a little bit messed up. So watch out for that. I'm just going to put it back with Command Z. If you want to select the outline as well, double click, you'll see the outline and the fill are both selected, so I can move them both together. If I click on the outline here, you'll see only part of it is selected. To select the whole thing, you double click and you'll see it selects the whole of the stroke, the whole of the outline. Once again, that moves independently of the fill. If I now do a second rectangle using the same color and the same stroke, you'll start to see some quirky behavior which could trip you up if you're not expecting it. If you remember from before when I talked about the brush tool, when we have two colors that are the same, that overlap, those two areas, those two objects will join together to become one. The same thing's true when you're using the rectangle tool here. So if I get to my selection tool, you'll see we've got one rectangle here, another one here, and an outline. So the outline has become one. The fill sections are presently independent of each other because they're separated by the stroke, by the outline. However, if I move the stroke away, those two fill areas will now overlap, and now they've become one. It can get very confusing if you're not expecting this type of behavior. Just going to undo that and get rid of that other rectangle. All right. Circles and ovals work in exactly the same way. If I grab the oval tool here, it's going to change to a different color. If I click and drag, I get an oval. If you want to get a perfect circle, as you drag, if you hold the Shift key down, you'll see that it locks onto being a perfect circle, the same height and width. Once again, if I select these objects and I overlap them, then we see the same behavior we saw before with the brush tool. So the outlines have become as one. If I move that out the way, we've got two overlapping fills now, but they're different colors. So this fill has now taken a chunk out of the one below. If you're expecting it, that could be a good thing. If you're not, that could really confuse you. There are ways of modifying these shapes, and this is quite a good technique to use. You can start drawing with basic shapes like circles and rectangles, and then change those shapes to get the end result that you're after. What I mean by that is this. If I've got the selection tool selected, if I go towards the edge of the rectangle here, the side of it, the long side, you'll see the cursor changes and it gets a little curve next to it. This means that if I click near that edge, I can turn it into a curve by pushing or pulling it. Likewise, if I go near a corner, you'll see the cursor changes to have that little corner icon. If I click there, I can drag that corner and move it around. It works for any of the corners here. So what starts off as a rectangle can very quickly become a completely different shape. And if you kind of think ahead, if you plan ahead and know roughly what you want, you can normally think of what basic shapes you want to put down first, that you can then modify to make something new. With a circle, you also get the curve tool, but it does kind of weird things to the circle. If I drag that, you can see it kind of operates on half of the circle at a time. So you can make things kind of egg-shaped. You can push the bottom inwards, give you a banana, and so on. So pushing and pulling things around is one way of modifying the shapes here. If you want to be really precise with what you do, so you can see this shape here, for example, it's not perfectly symmetrical. And if you wanted to tidy that up, you can actually have some finer control over this if you use the white selection arrow here, the sub-selection tool. So if I click on that and then select one of my shapes here, you'll see the green line that defines the shape is highlighted, and that green outline is defined by these nodes, by these points here. Clicking on any one of those points will show you, if it's a normal sharp corner like this, you can just pick up the point and move it around. So that works a little bit the same as the black selection tool. But if you click on a corner that is part of a curve, like there for example, you'll see these handles appear, and these handles let you adjust the shape and strength of the curve. So you can fine-tune the shape that you want. You can see here that's much more even and symmetrical. So the white selection tool, the sub-selection tool, lets you fine-tune your shape. Works with these curves as well. If I click on any of the curves, you can see this pair of handles here that defines each part of that curve. So you can pull and tweak and move those around to get the shape that you want. With any of these points highlighted, so if I click on one of these points, you can also use the cursor keys. So I can use the arrow keys. That's good if you want to fine-tune the position of points, if you want to be really precise. You can also delete points as well. So if I want to make this into a kind of a cheese shape, a wedge shape, I don't need 2 points up here, I just need one. So I can click on this point here, I can hit delete, and then reposition this into the center to give me that wedge shape. So that began as a rectangle, it's now quite different, just with a few simple pushes and pulls using the selection arrows. If you find that you're not the best freehand drawer, or you want to draw something a little bit more precise than you can get with the brush tool, then using the oval and rectangle tool is quite a good way of tackling this. You can generally build up fairly complex shapes and complex designs using these simple building blocks, just rectangles and ovals. So I'll show you an example. We'll do a similar rocket to the one I did before, but just using the rectangle and oval tools. So I'm going to start with the body of the rocket. I'm going to use a rectangle for that, black outline with a light grey fill. I'm going to put the body here and go to the black selection tool and push the top of that up to make the point of my rocket. I'm going to pull these corners in. And I've got a rough shape for the body of the rocket. For the fins at the side, once again, I'm going to use the rectangle tool, dark blue fill, I'm going to draw a skinny rectangle, and then modify it with the selection tool, go near the corners, and pull those into the shape that I want. I'll just pop that onto the side there so it's in the right place. There we go. If I double click, you see it selects the outline and the fill. I can copy that with Command C. I can paste it with Command V. And I want the opposite on this side. So I can head up to the Modify menu up here and Transform. This lets you do things like rotations and resizing and so on. But I'm going to do a flip. I'm going to flip it horizontally. So I've got a fin for this side now. I'll pop that on there. You can see the side of my spaceship's not quite the right shape. So double click. Oops, sorry, click away. Go to my selection tool and just bring that corner out to where it should be. Okay. Move that across a bit. We had a window on before, so going to get a dark grey fill. Going to go to the oval tool now, and it's best if you draw parts for your objects away from them, and then bring them on once you're happy with them. So I want a perfect circle here, so I'm going to hold down Shift, and there's the outline of my window. I want to have a blue bit of glass. So there's the window itself. Double click, bring it up on top. Once again, use the arrow keys to fine tune if you need to. Drag a box around, pop that onto there. I want a spike on top of the rocket. So back to the rectangle again. Back to my dark grey fill. I'm going to draw a skinny rectangle. I'm going to go to the sub-selection tool. Click on the border. Click on one of the points at the top. Delete it. Leave me one here. I'm going to use the arrows to move that across. That looks pretty symmetrical. And double click to select, the black selection tool. Double click to select everything and shift that on top of my rocket here. Okay, and the last thing was to have flames at the bottom. So I'm going to use the rectangle tool again for this. I'm going to fill it full of red. I'm going to draw a rectangle subselection, delete a point, bring that over. It's looking kind of flame-like. I'm going to bring the back to the black selection tool. I'm going to curve that slightly. And that's kind of flame-like. So double-clicking to select the stroke and the fill means that I can then move that down to here. I can use the arrow keys to fine-tune the position, and that's looking pretty good. To get the other colours, the other parts of the flame inside here, I'm going to just select the fill here. I'm going to copy it with Command C, paste it in with Command V, and what I want is a smaller orange version of that. Now I can change the size of this very easily by using this tool here. This is the transform tool, and if I click on that, you'll see I get some resize handles, which I can then drag to make it smaller. And with it highlighted, I can also go to the fill color here and change that, and then drag that down, and once again use the cursor keys, the arrow keys to fine tune it. If I copy and paste again, change that to yellow, make it smaller, and then drag that down to there. It's looking pretty good.